Problem solving, and creative problem solving in particular, is one of the main contributions that we as humans make in this world, both on the job and in our personal lives. As a result, it's useful for us to have an approach to solving problems that works for us. There are many creative problem-solving models around, some simplistic and others very sophisticated, or at least complicated, and they all have some features that are common to one another. For example, they all start with some statement of the problem, understanding that a problem well stated is a problem half solved. Another common trait is some step in which the problem solvers generate some options. Correspondingly, there is a trait in all the models in which the problem solvers choose a solution and then launch action. The model described in this little video shares those traits and incorporates some nuances that I find through experience to be particularly powerful and at the same time easy to comprehend and carry out. I call this model the Pentacle Path, and you'll soon get a sense of how it gets its name. As with the other models, the first step is to define the problem. I find it useful to frame the problem as a question, being as clear and as specific as possible. The main difference between this approach and the problem definition statement is where the creative energy goes after that step is completed. When the problem statement is a descriptive sentence, I normally feel the energy in the room pressing down on the problem solvers as they grapple with the challenges embodied in the statement. When the problem is stated as a question, the energy in the room rises to explore possible answers to the question. The participants tend to be more engaged and more animated. Framing the question is not a trivial step. Recently, I facilitated a session with 3 senior executives to solve a particularly nasty challenge. It took us over an hour and a half to formulate the question. Once we had the question in hand, it was remarkably straightforward to complete the rest of the steps and produced a potent and compelling action plan. From here, there are 5 distinct activities, taken in sequence the first time around. In each case, the activity is focused on the framed question. Again, common with other problem-solving models, there are steps that require largely divergent thinking and other steps that require mostly convergent thinking. These need to be kept as distinct and separate discussions, with, by and large, the divergent discussion preceding the convergent one. The need for this separation has to do with the orientation of the problem solvers in the room. Half of them have a tendency towards generating ideas, and if left alone, many would continue to generate lots of ideas without ever settling on any one of them. The other half of the room, as soon as they see the challenge question, will tend to leap to the solution, and it's typically one that is a known approach or answer, not much creativity or original thought. Divergent thinking without convergent thinking generates no solution. Convergent thinking without divergent thinking generates suboptimal solutions. The first activity in the divergent thinking process, step 2 in the overall process, is getting to know what we know. That is, having the problem solvers share everything they know about the question, whether that be based on exhaustive quantitative analysis or personal subjective observation. The result of this activity is a rich tapestry of multiple perspectives, building a bond of shared understanding across the group. When I facilitate this process, I take into account the 3 major styles of participating. Some of us want to get our thoughts in order before we share them. Others of us prefer to dive in with some initial ideas, then feed off the ideas that others have put on the table. And still others just start talking. It's as if they need to get their physical mouths working in order to get the brain engaged. All 3 styles are valid ways of participating and are to be honored, even the third model. To ensure everyone has an equal opportunity to contribute, however, I normally ask everyone to take 2 or 3 minutes and write down what they know about the subject matter of the question before sharing their thoughts. That tends to level the playing field, as the saying goes. The expressed thoughts are then recorded visibly on flip charts, a whiteboard, or a computer projected on a large screen. Once we've reached the point where we think we've got most of the items on the table, we move to the next step in the process, exploring the possibilities. As we move between steps 2 and 3, we metaphorically close a screen door so we can concentrate exclusively on exploring possibilities. Later on in the discussion, a member of the group might think of another piece of information to be considered in the getting to know what we know step. The group can then look at this data through the screen door and consciously choose to let it in or not. When exploring the possibilities, there are a number of techniques available in the public domain to support the generation of ideas. Based on the nature of the question, there will be some techniques more appropriate than others. For some thoughts on this dimension, take a look at the companion video to this one on dealing with ideas. The major challenge for each participant in this activity is to acknowledge and suspend judgment. It is important not to have any constraints on the generation of possibilities. We will do that constraining later. This notion of suspending judgment means that we can set our opinion aside for the moment, knowing that we can bring it into the discussion at a later stage. We're not losing it, we're just deferring it. This suspension of judgment allows for the free flow of ideas. Allowing ideas to flow freely results in more comprehensive exploration, and through combinations of unusual or unworkable ideas, the group may generate some potentially powerful ideas to incorporate in the solution. It is now time to move from divergent thinking to convergent thinking and start making some choices. At this point, we move forward and close another screen door. In moving from exploring the possibilities to making directional choices, the group needs to establish some criteria for making those choices. Many of those criteria will be inherent in the core question if it is sufficiently comprehensive. It is always useful still to ask the question, are there any specific criteria that our choices need to satisfy? Further, which are mandatory and which are merely desirable? Here we are making the strategic choices that will produce the results that will answer the question. I use the word strategic in the sense that it's defining the major whats that will be initiated. The hows come later. The key word in this phrase is directional. We cannot act or decide in the future, just as we cannot act or decide in the past. We can decide and act only in the present. In that light, when we make a strategic choice, essentially what we're doing is pointing our feet in a particular direction and holding an intent in our minds to move in that direction. So any choice we make is, by definition, directional. The second activity in convergent thinking, and the fifth step in the process, is to initiate conditional action. Once again, every problem-solving approach gets to action, and in pretty well all cases, these actions include what's to be done, who's to lead it or do it, by when. The nuance here is in the word conditional. The Prussian general Karl von Clausewitz declared that strategy is good only until first contact with the enemy. The notion in initiating conditional action is that once we do something that will begin to answer our question, things undoubtedly will happen that will encourage us to reshape the action we have defined. It could be an unexpected pushback to our actions, greater impact of the action than we had anticipated, or something emerging in the environment which makes the action either undoable or at least ineffective. This takes us to the importance of step number 6 in the process. Too often at this point, the problem solvers in the exercise think that their work is done. The choices have been made, and now someone is on the nut to carry out the action that will create the outcomes that answer the question. Coming back to von Clausewitz's observation, we need to have a mechanism in place to ensure the directional choices we made and the conditional actions we initiated remain relevant and effective. So one of the last things the assembled problem solvers need to establish is a review mechanism that will work. It may include regular reviews to keep everybody in the loop, as well as emergency sessions when things appear to be going off the rails. With the continuing dialogue vehicle in place, the problem solvers reconnect at some point and re-enter the Pentacle Path process. This time around, however, they don't necessarily need to follow the steps in order. While they might start with sharing the events that occurred since the last meeting, they might move directly from there to adjust the directional choices. Or they might jump right into exploring more possibilities. Or they might merely adjust the action plan. It doesn't matter the sequence or the focus. What's important is that it makes sense to the assembled problem solvers. So that's all there is to it. If it appeals to you, I encourage you to make it your own and adjust it in whatever way you see fit. Just remember some of the principles on which this particular model was built. First, framing the problem as a question results in the creative energy flowing more freely. Second, divergent thinking gets more options on the table. Convergent thinking gets decisions on the table. Third, allowing everyone to share what they know builds a common understanding of the challenge as well as a pact to create a solution. Fourth, choices are, by definition, directional. And fifth, defined actions are, by definition, conditional. Finally, it's not done till it's done. Keep the dialogue flowing until it is. If you have any suggestions to make this creative problem-solving process work better, we welcome your contributions. You can reach me at this email address. And now, go have some fun solving problems.